Welcome to Rock Your Reinvention, the show for high-achieving career women who refuse to settle for mediocrity and aren't afraid to take bold action. This is a place where you can authentically show up, where every dream and goal can be validated and achieved. Hi, I'm your host, Karen Freeland, a certified life reinvention coach, speaker, and award-winning author. I'm here to give you the tips, tools, and strategies to help you shift your mindset, build your confidence, and take meaningful actions so you can rock your reinvention. Ready to go from stuck to thriving? Let's go. Hello, and welcome back to Rock Your Reinvention. First of all, before we get into today's topic about the dreaded imposter syndrome, I just want to say thank you to everyone who helped me get to 1,000 downloads of the show. Such a big milestone. So exciting. By the time you listen to this, I'll be hopefully well over the 1,000 mark, but I just got the notification over the weekend before I was recording this episode, and I really want to just give a heartfelt thanks for being a part of this and just listening and tuning in every week. Thank you. I will continue to show up for you and hopefully create great content. As always, if you have a topic you want me to cover or something that you want to have me chat about on the show, please send me a note, Karen@KarenFreeland.com. Okay, so let's break down imposter syndrome today. Now, before we do that, I got to be honest, I don't really love the term imposter syndrome because I don't know, syndrome makes it sound like there's something wrong with you. It feels to me more like a medical diagnosis. Like if you have something that's, actually physically wrong with you, you'd be like, oh, I have this X syndrome. Well, in my mind, imposter syndrome is really just negative feelings about yourself, thoughts of inadequacy. Like, I'm not good enough. They're going to find out that I don't really know what I'm talking about. So to me, if I look at the definition of a syndrome, it says a group of signs and symptoms that occur together and characterize a particular abnormality or condition. Yeah, I'll give you it's a group of signs, right? Like, oh, I feel inadequate, or I don't feel capable of doing something. Ooh, I'm having a challenge. This is unusual. I don't always love dealing with challenges. I don't know how to deal with challenges, right? It's these thoughts and emotions that kind of go around a particular situation, maybe in your career, maybe in your relationships, wherever. But to me, that's not an abnormality. Hi, you're human. Sometimes we have those kinds of thoughts. And usually these thoughts come from having negative experiences or allowing negative thoughts that we've sometimes created for ourselves and allowing them to take root in your mind. So I don't really love calling it imposter syndrome, but that's how we've all come to know it. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. And what I have experienced in my life is that the best way to overcome imposter syndrome and the easiest thing to do is to change your thoughts, because your thoughts will impact your feelings. And ultimately, when you have better feelings about yourself, you're going to take different actions. So for example, in your career, if you're feeling inadequate in a specific area of your job, if you start to think differently about that, you're going to feel differently. You're not going to feel as inadequate. And then you're going to take different actions that are not going to be actions that would hold you back. Let me break this down. The easiest way is to jump into some examples. And from my research, what I have found is that there are 5 specific types of imposter syndrome. And by understanding each one of these types, you're going to be able to identify which one is most common in you so that you can turn around and address that. Remember, we can't fix what we're not aware of. So everything in coaching always starts with awareness. We need to become aware of our negative thoughts so we can fix them. We need to become aware of our feelings of inadequacy so we can fix them, and not just take them as staples, as for granted, like, oh, this is just how it is. It doesn't have to be that way. You have the power to shift your thoughts, your feelings, and take different actions to reinvent your life. Okay, the first one is what we call the perfectionist. Are you like, oh, yes, that's me? This first type is one of the most common imposter syndrome types. And this type is typically characterized by a very strong fear of failure and a need to always be perfect, to always be right. Perfectionists have very high standards for themselves, focused on avoiding every single mistake possible and avoiding as many risks as possible. And even the smallest mistake is turned into the biggest failure in the world, right? Oh my gosh, I didn't get that job. It's over for me. I knew I wasn't meant to succeed in this career. I'm never going to make it to the next level, or I'm never going to get out of this company. I'll just accept my fate, right? It's like we're so dramatic about it. And this feeling that every little mistake is the end of the road for you, it's a death sentence. This causes strong feelings of guilt and shame that prevent you from moving forward and realizing how awesome you actually are. Now, I can't say like I love failing, right? I mean, who really loves failing? In the moment, it never feels good. But here's what I will say. I appreciate failing and I see its necessity because that is where all of the growth happens. You know, if I hadn't failed at owning my first business, I wouldn't have learned how to properly price myself as a coach. I wouldn't have learned how and when to hire help. I wouldn't have learned what boundaries I needed to set in my business. I could go on, but those are just some examples, right? I'm glad that we failed at that first business. And I say we because I had a business partner. It wasn't the right thing for me ultimately anyway. And she had other things she needed to go on and do. But it was this wonderful experience that we got to have for 8 awesome months and learned so much from it. Letting go of the need to be perfect and to have everything I do be a success has been such a game changer and freed up my ability to go try new things, right? And take some of those risks. So here's my question. If you are like, yes, I'm the perfectionist 100%, I want you to take a note. I want you to answer these 2 questions. Where are you letting perfection paint a false picture of you? So meaning you've set this bar for yourself. It's so unbelievably high and you come just like inches short of it. And you paint this false picture of yourself that you're just not good enough. Where specifically are you letting that happen in your life? And the second question for you is how could you embrace the idea of good enough in your life, in your career, in your relationships, in your parenting, right? When is good enough okay? How could you embrace that concept? Give that some thought. And hopefully that's going to help you get some really powerful insights. Okay, the second one is called the natural genius. Yes, this is where you have this feeling of entitlement. You're so smart and you're so intelligent and you're such a high achiever. But as soon as you have a struggle, you're like completely frustrated. And you're like, no, I should know how to do this. Something's wrong with me. Right? In the past, everything has probably come really easy to you. You don't have to put a lot of effort in because, well, you're naturally pretty talented. But the second you experience a challenge, it's like you get completely derailed. And you're like, oh, see, I knew I wasn't really good enough. A lot of times this happens to people who had high academic success in their younger years, right? They didn't have to put in a lot of effort at school and pretty much got A's in every class. So now when you're hitting more difficult tasks, you start to get discouraged. What I think is really interesting, I was going to say funny, but it's not really funny. It's interesting about the natural genius is that most people don't admit that they're in this category because their self-image is so low that you discredit a lot of your genius. right? Like, you see a guy walking around like, I'm so great, I'm so talented. Yeah, I'm just getting promoted all the time, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, okay, that he's cocky. Wow. Like, he thinks he's all that in a bag of chips. Now we know that he's probably overcompensating. And there's women out there too, so I don't want to overly gender stereotype here, but there's women out there who are pretty cocky, maybe a little bigger for the britches, but usually that is almost like an overcorrection, right? They are compensating for those insecurities. Most women aren't walking around like, oh, I'm such a genius, right? Like I have to put in so much effort now that, wow, that's really strange, but I'm going to push through it because, I know I'm really talented and I'm smart. No, these women legit think that they've lost it. That's something special. That je ne sais quoi that they used to have is suddenly now gone, and it's gone for good. Like there's no way they can get it back. What a bunch of garbage. What a bunch of garbage. You're not just naturally smart and talented in one area of life and not able to figure things out in another area of life, okay? You are a genius in every facet of your life. Stop discrediting yourself. Stop being discouraged because there is something in your life right now that's taking a little more effort. If it were easy, everyone would do it. Sometimes we are going to face challenges that test us in different ways. That doesn't mean that you're not smart, talented, or capable. It just means you have a really exciting challenge in front of you. And you're going to feel so good when you overcome it. So if this is you, if you're the natural genius, I want you to ask yourself two things. First, in what ways are you letting the level of effort that you have to put forth right now trick you into thinking that you're not capable? Think about that. The amount of effort that you have to put forward is actually tricking you into thinking that you are not capable. In what ways is that happening in your life? And if you let go of those negative thoughts, what would actually be possible for you? What could you accomplish? Have a think about that. All right, imposter syndrome type number 3 is what we call the rugged individualist. Oh yeah, you know this one. You think you don't need anybody's help to succeed. You're just going to go it alone. And by golly, if you can't figure it out alone, something must be wrong with you. This type is also characterized by fear of vulnerability and that difficulty of asking for help. Oh my goodness, if I ask for help on this project, they're going to think I don't know what I'm doing. They're going to fire me. I'm going to lose my job. No, this thinking can be so dangerous because when there are tasks that can only be achieved with help of others, like working on team projects and needing to collaborate in a business, you're actually doing yourself a disservice. And those around you are going to be like, well, why doesn't she want to work as part of this team? And it's going to be detrimental to morale and the progress of the team. You're hurting yourself by trying to be so independent. In my book, Grab Life by the Dreams, I talk about how a lot of people will say it's kind of like an old American adage, like, I'm going to pull myself up by the bootstraps. And if you really think about it, that's completely illogical. Like, I don't even physically know how one pulls themselves up by the bootstraps. I don't even think that that's physically possible. But really, the bigger mistake in this thinking is that the biggest stars out there, the top CEOs, the people that you're probably looking at and being like, oh, if I only had a life like them, or if I only reached their level of success, they ask for help all the time. They have personal trainers. They have personal chefs. They have coaches like me. They have babysitters and nannies and someone to do the grocery shopping and someone who does the dry cleaning and some, the list goes on and on and on. They have entire teams of people around them helping them be successful so they get to focus on that one little thing that they do really well, right? Their little zone of genius. You do not need to do anything on your own. Don't be afraid to ask for help. It has nothing to do with your capability, your skill level. Like asking a question or asking for help has nothing to do with that. And oftentimes I've talked about this before. Asking for help is actually offers a lot of joy for someone else, right? When I was in corporate and someone would ask me for my help or my input on something, I was like, wow, they value my opinion. They want to know what I think about this. That made me feel good. Don't rob someone of that. So if you're recognizing right now that you're the rugged individualist and that you just feel like the second you have to ask for help, that is your death sentence, that is your indictment that you're just not capable, I want you to ask yourself the following two questions. In what areas of your life could you benefit from help? Like, get clear about it. Where could you use some help right now? And how could asking for that help benefit you? Paint the picture. What are the pros of you finally asking for help from your spouse, from your coworker, from your boss, from your friend, from your business partner, whatever it is? You get the picture. Really paint the picture of the benefits. Don't focus on the negatives. Okay, imposter syndrome type number 4 is called the expert. And the expert is the type of imposter syndrome where you feel like you're actually not an expert in the field you're working in. So it's kind of like a play on, psychology there. It's like called the expert, but you just never feel like the expert. It's what you're striving for. And it's really rooted in a sense of insecurity and self-doubt. And that can also have a negative effect on your motivation. People with this type of imposter syndrome typically feel like I'm not smart enough. I don't know enough to take that role on. I'm not experienced enough in that discipline. And they have those really strong feelings of inadequacy. They're the ones that spend all the time learning a new skill. They're always taking more courses. They're always taking another training. They're always researching how to be the expert. But no matter how much they do, it's never enough. They still don't feel like they've got enough degrees. They've got enough information. Someone else must have the silver bullet. I've definitely done this in my business since I started coaching. There were seasons where I just took every single free webinar I could find on marketing, every free webinar I could find on SEO or social media, this person's content model, that person's content model. Is like, somebody knows something I don't. And it was all in the vein of becoming the expert and thinking that just, I'm not good enough. I can't trust my instincts. Someone else has the right solution, but not me. And I'm finally in a place in the last 4 years where I have said, okay, that's it, Karen. No more trainings, no more courses. You need to start trusting yourself. You have all the answers you need. This is the kind of stuff I tell my clients all the time. I was like, let's drink our own champagne. So I want to invite you today to drink your own champagne if you are the expert, because you already have all the answers. You know everything you need to know. And now it's just about executing. So I want you to ask yourself, what would be possible for you if you didn't need to be the expert? If you already had all the skills you needed right now, what would be possible for you? And then if I were that expert, what would I do? What are the next logical steps I would take in my life right now that I haven't been doing? Because I've been waiting to become the expert, even though you already are the expert. So what would you do? List out some actions that you would take, and I hope you'll be brave enough to go ahead and take those. Okay, the 5th one, the final type of imposter syndrome is what we call the Superwoman type. Oh yeah, you know this one. She shows up with a cape. She's got an S on her chest. She's ready to go. People with this type set those unrealistic expectations for themselves. And then when we don't meet those unrealistic expectations, we feel like a failure. Anyone struggling with this type will often try to outwork and outachieve their peers just to prove themselves. They often take on too many projects, too many tasks, trying to do it all and prove to everybody and themselves that they can handle it. They've got this. And unfortunately, what that does is it ends up burning you out. And if you've been listening to this show for a while, you know I just did a whole bunch of episodes on burnout. So if this is you and you're struggling with some of that burnout because of overloading with yourself with all these tasks and projects, I want you to go back to episode 16, busting 3 burnout myths so you can experience better health and balance. And I would recommend episode 28, 4 reasons to break up with busy. Those 2 episodes specifically are going to help you if you are the Superwoman type. And so if that's you, I want you to ask yourself 2 questions. First, how can I set more realistic expectations for myself? Really think about that. Where have you set the bar extremely high? And you could lower it just a little bit, and it would still be higher than 99% of everyone else's bar. Okay? It's not like we're settling. Your lowering of the bar isn't like, oh, I was going to wait for a guy who, had a job and was really good with kids and was a good human being, things like that. And you're like, no, I'll just take the next guy who walks into this bar. Like that's not what I'm talking about, right? It's like, oh, I need to do 15 extracurricular activities, be on the PTO, like all these things. I got to make goodie bags for my kids' classroom and they have to be stuffed with 18 things in them and blah, blah, blah. And like way overachieving where it's like, you know what? I could just send in a thing of cupcakes from Publix or whatever your grocery store is. And we could call this a day. That's good enough. Okay. That's what I'm talking about. Find those areas where you've set those unrealistic expectations and what would it look like to set them as more realistic? And then the other thing, because the Superwoman never acknowledges her little successes and her little wins because she's so busy just trying to push on to the next thing, I want you to ask yourself, how would it feel to start celebrating all of my accomplishments, no matter how small? Think about that. And maybe even list them out. Go ahead. List out some of those smaller accomplishments that you glazed right over. Think about those for a second. Maybe your team just got recognized, but you were like, oh, they're just doing their job. Yeah, yep, okay. And you didn't even take time to recognize you led that team. You played a role in that. Even if you didn't do the work, you held them accountable. You set the vision. You clearly articulated and delegated. I mean, there are so many things in there to be really proud of yourself for. But the Superwoman doesn't acknowledge those things. So I want to invite you to do that right now. Okay. And you may find yourself in more than one bucket. I mean, I definitely can resonate with a couple of these, although I know which ones are kind of stick out the most for me. But you may feel yourself experiencing symptoms from a couple of these, and that's okay. Again, there's nothing abnormal about having feelings of inadequacy. Now that we know we have them, though, let's address them. So again, just as a recap, number 1, you might be the perfectionist. Number 2 is the natural genius. Number 3 is the rugged individualist. Number 4 is the expert. And number 5 is the Superwoman. So hopefully you'll take to heart those 2 questions I asked at the end of each one of those imposter syndrome types, okay? So that you can really explore that for yourself. But as an overall challenge, I really want you to journal about which one you embody most and why. Why do you think that is the one that you have fallen into? Is there something that happened in the past? Is there a specific thing you can point to? What was it? And then come up with 3 actions that you're going to take to move away from this behavior. And for example, one of those actions might be to do an affirmation, right? You might want to say something like, I'm okay with good enough, right? Like if you're a recovering perfectionist, like I'm okay with good enough. That is a great affirmation for you to try on for a bit. Or you may want to start delegating something or setting more realistic goals and expectations. And if you're not sure if your goals are realistic, ask a friend, ask a coach, right? That's one of the things I'm able to do for my clients is tell them when they're not setting high enough expectations and when they're they're setting them too high. Whatever you do, don't keep going status quo. You now know the type of imposter syndrome that is holding you back and preventing you from living your dream life, from truly rocking your reinvention. I want you to go tackle it. Tackle it with confidence. You got this. You don't need to let this hold you back anymore. Your goals and your dreams are way too important to let some made up term that just basically summarizes a feeling of inadequacy that can totally be overcome hold you back, okay? You're way too great for all that. I hope you will take that to heart. And until next week, stay fabulous. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you're inspired to take action by committing to one of the tips or strategies we talked about in today's episode. And if you want accountability and support, I've got your back. Join my private Facebook group, Successful Working Women Rocking Reinvention today. You'll find a community of like-minded women waiting to support you, exclusive content, and helpful resources to ensure you succeed. Lastly, if you loved this episode, do me a favor and be sure to leave a review. Together, we can encourage more women to live their purpose. See you next time.